Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place where we share creative and inspiring learning in our schools. Season 3, Episode 34. Hello and welcome back to the Education on Fire podcast with me, Mark Taylor. And today I'm absolutely delighted to have Anderson and Addison, who are the children of Ramona Rice, who I know through podcast websites, who support my podcast and host my podcast and give me all things technical support-wise. And when we were talking about coming on and talking about schools and getting children's ideas, they were fantastically interested and wanted to come on and share their opinions. So thank you very much, both of you. And we're going to chat to Anderson first, who's in the 5th grade. And can you just tell us a little bit about where you live? Because for people over here in the UK listening, they might not quite know where you are in the US. So if you could just tell us a little bit about where you are in America and also what type of school that you go to at the minute.
I live in the USA. I live in Virginia in Hampton. It's a nice city. And I go to this school called Cooper Elementary.
Fantastic. And how many different year groups go there? How many different grades are in your school?
There are 7 grades in all. There's a pre-K, I think, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade.
Fantastic. And for those of us that don't have a grade system, we have sort of a year system here in England. What sort of age group is that? Is that sort of from when you're really tiny up until what age?
It actually, here it doesn't matter how old you are. If you're smart enough, you could probably skip a grade. And if you feel like you need it in it, and also if you feel like you didn't get this year, you didn't get enough done, you can restart the year. It doesn't matter what your age. In fact, you can be in college right now and you could be 10 years old.
Oh, okay. I see. Right. So it's slightly different than over here from that point of view. Brilliant. Okay. So our first question is, if you could design your own classroom, what would it look like? So, for example, would it be a big open plan loft style kind of thing? Small rooms? Would you sit in rows? Would you work in groups? How would you devise it if you had complete creative control?
Well, that's a good question, but it all depends on what thing you're teaching. If you're planning to teach science, is my favorite subject. You would probably want to put it in groups for all the things you can find out. Because in my school, in 4th grade, you get to mess around with oysters, do experiment, and go on all kinds of field trips for it. And I would have a medium-sized classroom for that, for all the stuff and going around and asking stuff. So I would have like a big Promethean board in the front of the class. I would have 6 different tables, a back table, and my own desk, and a few like cubbies and stuff.
That's really interesting because I really like what you came up with there is the fact that everything that you do is slightly different, isn't it? Depending on what you're learning and where you are and what the topic is and that sort of thing. You need a different environment depending on that. So can I just wind you back there for a second? Did you say you do some things with oysters? How does that work? What sort of lesson is that?
All right, in the beginning of the year, in Hampton, there were 4 9 weeks of school. And how that works, each 9 weeks, you see how big, you measure the oysters, and then you see if they grow and grow. And at the end of the year, you put what they were first like, and then how much they grew.
Ah, fantastic. That's a great thing to do. I really like that idea. That's not something I've heard before. And yeah, and you do that in 5th grade, or you do that in lots of different grades, or?
I did that in 4th grade.
Okay. That sounds really, really good. I think that's absolutely great fun. So what are your favourite types of things that you learn? I mean, and what are at the moment? What are the different types of environments you learn in? So do you spend lots of time outside, or is it always inside? And how does that work?
We mostly spend our time inside. We go outside for like recess and stuff, but we spend most of our time inside because the thing is, in 4th grade, It's not one teacher teaching the whole thing. You go to different teachers and rotate around the pods. Like you have to go to like three different classrooms: science, social studies, and math. You have to go to three different classrooms to learn all of that.
Okay. And what age are you at the moment?
I am right now 10.
Okay, so that sounds like here in the UK, that's the sort of thing that often happens when you go to what's called our secondary school. So maybe a year or two older than you, then all the subjects you have a specialist teacher for. But often you have the same teacher for most of the things that happen here, although I know there are some schools who do specialise a little bit. So from what you've just said, like you say, a lot of the time you're inside. If you could actually decide exactly how much time you'd like to spend inside and outside, and if you could split your day up into how much time you spent playing, how much time you doing exercise, how much time you were doing games, that sort of thing, what do you think you would do? How would you split your day up?
I would give at least every. I would give everything an hour except for recess. I would give like math, social studies, science, language arts, all that at least an hour. And then outside, I like 15 minutes to get all that energy out. And then I would like to spend 45 minutes eating my lunch. Um, yeah, and for resource like not recess but resource like music, art, PE, I'd give them at least 30 minutes each.
Okay, and would you do that same thing every day, or would you have a sort of a slightly different timetable each day of the week?
I wouldn't do that because that could mess people up and distract the schedule and get people confused. But it all depends on the day because it could be like holidays are coming up, it could be a half day, and it all depends on that. And that's the thing, you have to be like prepared for the year. You have to be prepared for like the good students, the bad students. You have to be prepared for early dismissal, how you're gonna get all these kids to learn this stuff by the end of the year.
I see. Therefore, sort of flexibility is actually really important because, like you say, each day can be different because you might have a project coming up or some kind of performance, or like you say, there's a half day because of the time of year and that sort of thing. So, therefore, being flexible is actually quite an important part of that, I would think. So, that sounds like that's really good. And what I really liked was your kind of working for a period of time and then having some time outside to blow off some steam and then be able to come back afresh. And I think that's quite a nice idea. If you could do that regularly throughout the day, I think you get much more done and you feel really ready to start again, don't you? Our next question is, how do you assess your progress? So, sort of by that, how do you, the things that you like, the things you want to achieve, or the things that you're learning, how at the moment do you assess your progress? And if you had a choice, how would you do it? So, have you got any exams or tests and that you have to do regularly? And if you could choose how you were going to be assessed, would you have a different way of doing it or any other ideas that you think might help you?
Well, once again, it's like that question you asked me earlier. How would I design my classroom? It would depend on what kind of test I'm taking. If it's an important test like an SOL or just a subject test, it's where you've been talking about something for like a week and you think the students have everything and you take a test. I would spend for like a subject test 30 minutes of studying every night. Cause let me tell you, that can be really helpful. And then if it's like for SOLs, I'd spend like an hour because those things are important. They go.
Okay. So actually studying and actually having the tests you think are important because it gives you your sense of how you're progressing rather than just the conversation with your teacher or being able to see how well you're progressing. You actually think the tests are important and you don't mind doing them, or do you find the working towards them, like you said, is extra study actually quite a useful thing for you in terms of knowing how you're getting on?
Well, it depends on what kind of the test it is. Like if it's not that important test, I'm not gonna worry about it too much. But if it really is that big of a deal and the teacher's saying like, hey, get that done, you need to know this by the end of the year or else I don't know, you're not gonna be successful. Then I'm gonna take it seriously. But most of the time teachers say it's a big deal, but it ends up just a normal test.
Right. And so, if you had a complete control, would you decide not to do any tests at all, or do you think they are important?
They are important. It shows the teacher what you know, what you don't need help with, what you do need help with. I really support that. I just think there's an easier way to do it than what the schools are doing right now.
Okay. And so, tell me a little bit about that then. What do you think you would do if you could change it and have it a different way?
If that big of a test was coming up, I wouldn't worry about starting some new stuff and doing that. I would worry about just studying, taking some time and doing that, letting your students do that. And also, I would give them right before the test, like right before the test, I would give them actually no, 3 minutes to review their notes.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I quite like that idea. So whatever you're studying at the moment, spend a lot of focused time on that, and also not have it remembered from a long time ago. Actually, have the opportunity to have what you need around you just before you need to do it, so that you've got it fresh in your mind.
Yeah, that's right.
Great. Yeah, I can completely understand that. I mean, I often do that when I'm a musician, and even when I've practiced a lot and when I've got things that I've got to perform, every time I'm about to go and do a different show, I do just spend my part of my warm up routine is just going over those corners, those little extra things I want to make sure that I'm okay with, and it just refreshes it in my mind. And it's a really key thing to I find really helps me to be able to remember and to perform to the best way that I can. So I think that's a really interesting thing you said, and a really great idea. So then my next question is, how often do you discuss and think about things like what you eat, what you exercise, breathing, sleeping, mindfulness, gratitude, volunteering, things which aren't necessarily deemed to be sort of academic subjects like maths and English and those sorts of things that we do, but slightly more wider afield. How often is that part of your school, say your school week, or what you would cover in a semester? Um, and do you think those things are important, or do you get all that information from outside of school and you don't think it needs to be part of the school day?
Well, that's the thing. Our school has a weird way of saying, all right, not a weird way. They make us wear uniforms at our school, and I don't think that's really necessary. Really necessary, and then they still make us do all that exercising and stuff. So I think they don't need it. So I think if they're not gonna let us wear the proper stuff we need to wear to exercise, and then they say it's our fault for not passing like some gym thing. Maybe they should think about that. So I think you should do that outside of school. But the activities and the breathing and how to eat, yes, that's something you need to learn in school because it's something really important.
Oh, good. And so, how often at the moment do you talk about those things during school?
Every time I go to PE, which I hope my PE teacher's not listening to this, is my least favorite subject because we have to wear uniforms. We had to wear uniforms and we had to do activities and like we had to sit on the ground. We had to sit on the ground. It's not that even big of a room. I really don't know how to get that school gets stuff done. They really need to upgrade the PE stuff.
Oh, right. Okay. So, it's during sort of PE that you sort of talk about that slightly wider thing about you as a person and things like exercise and what you eat and how you look after yourself. That's sort of part of your sort of physical education class, as it were. So, my next question is, how often do you discuss and think about the whole cycle of life, in terms of when babies are born or when people die, that kind of thing? There's something that happens in my children's school where every time a baby's born into a family, they get to ring an old school bell, which is kind of like welcoming a new child into the community. Do you have anything like that where you talk about the cycle of life and what's important about actually how your life works and the whole spectrum of what's involved in that?
No, our school doesn't really talk about that, but I think that's actually kind of a good idea. The only thing we've gotten close to the life cycle is butterflies and frogs.
Okay, so it's sort of very general in terms of almost practically what happens because you can understand it from that sort of animal point of view, but not specifically related to yourself. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, kind of. And I heard you, and excuse me if I didn't hear this right. I heard you saying something about managing your life and stuff.
Yes. Um, it's kind of what I mean by that sort of thing is kind of depending on how you want your life to be. You have a certain amount of control over of what you want to do within your life, and I think that's quite an important thing. And I think understanding that you have some control over your life and understanding the life cycle, so that you understand that from being able to think, well, I have this day to day and I want to achieve something, that actually understanding how that fits in your ability to be able to do something and the life cycle of every person is quite an important thing.
All right, I see where you're saying this, but our school only does that one time, and that's where it's this thing called Career Day. But I perfectly think they should talk about what we want to be, make us write a paragraph, because I know perfectly and well what I want to be when I grow up. And that didn't come from school. That just came from family members and stuff.
Fabulous. And can you tell us a bit about that then? What is that first of all? What is it that you'd like to be?
I want to be a successful business owner, so I can have so I can have a nice house, so I can have a nice house like the one I'm living in.
Very nice. And how do you think you can go about that? Is it by things that you've learnt at school, or how do the things you do at school now will help you do that? And how much of your understanding of things you've learnt from outside of school do you think has been supportive of that?
I think all of outside of school has done this because my grandma owns a company, and my and if the successful business thing doesn't work, I'll just get a good job that pays very well like my grandpa.
Ah,
And
brilliant.
they've
Yep.
been very successful so far.
Fabulous. Well, that brings me on to my next question, which is really perfect, which is how often do you discuss money and budgets and savings and financial planning and all those sorts of business type things? Is that something that you do as part of your school work, or it sounds like maybe that's the sort of thing you will have come across and understand through your family and their kind of work in their business outside of school?
Well, they don't talk about that at all at school, like legitimately not at all. But I do talk about that, and I have like long ways to go before I can say, okay, I have enough to own a business. I need to like start with a small job when I'm like a teen, and then go from there. And it's really important to do, and it's really important to be doing that to start the business.
Yeah, and that way you can understand, can't you, stage by stage, by like you say, having your first little job, understanding how to save money, and if there's something you're saving for, how you can budget for it, and put a financial planning in place in order to get you to the next thing that you want to do. And I think that's a very astute thing to want to do, and a good understanding of that. So and interesting, like you say, that it's not something that happens in school necessarily, but something that you've learned outside of school, and you've obviously got a great idea and a drive to put that into place. So my next question then is, do you work with a mentor, and do you know what a mentor is?
Yes, and kind of. See, I do know what a mentor is, but it all depends on what kind of mentor you're talking about. I consider a karate person a mentor, a sensei or something.
Yeah.
But other than that, like no, other than karate, no. I try to learn these things myself because learning it yourself may be better than having someone else telling you this stuff. Because how else are you gonna learn? When you grow up, you're not just gonna walk in a building and say, "Hey, do you know this? Can you teach me about it?"
So in lots of ways, then I guess you'd say that having lots of different mentors in different areas of your life are quite important, and then from there you can make up your own mind. So, like you say, if you have a karate sensei that's your mentor, and you might have, I guess you could say that some of your teachers at school are like a mentor for you as well as just a teacher, in terms of how they can support you and how they can guide you in things, not specifically just about what you're doing any given day in a classroom. So a combination of all those people, and like I said about family members that have sort of shown you things about their business, I guess they all become mentors in different types of ways and in different aspects. And I think what you said there is a really good idea, that you just take from all of these people, and then from there you can make up your own mind and work in the best way possible for you. So I think that sounds like a really smart way of being. My next question is, how often do you lead a team of people? So do you do things at school, or would you like to do things which are things like projects, or when you're working on something with a group of people? And if you do that, do you like to be the person that takes control, or are you the sort of person that sits back and let other people take control? And what do you feel about that?
Well, the thing is, a lot of people at my school are very are jerks.
Right.
And some of the teachers can be like that sometimes. But yeah, I kind of like. I don't like. I would put someone else in charge because I'm not the brightest bulb in the light shop. But I would put someone responsible in.
Okay. And do you find that sort of within a group of people that you may be working in, everyone's got slightly different skills, and so do you find that people then, if you're in a group and you're in part of a team, that people say, "Oh, actually, I could do this part of it because I like maybe designing something, or I'll lead it because I feel like I'm a strong leader, or I'll look after a budget side of it because I like that sort of thing." Do you find that sort of people do that naturally, and therefore they sort of work to their strengths?
It's kind of actually voting, which is not the smartest way. Before we even do a project, they make us do a design sheet of whatever we're doing, and we need to vote on whose idea is the best. And that's kind of like it, but I don't think that's smart because our very last project, it was limited supplies. We just Voting's not the way. It's whoever's smartest. It's who well not smartest, but it's whoever can manage the limited supplies. Because it's not ev- supplies falling from the sky. Sometimes when you're doing a project, you have only a limited stuff, and that's how they make us do it in things. So we need to be smart and say, okay, well, if we only have this limited supplies, we need a small thing, something basic, but that would be good. Or if we have unlimited supplies, let's use our imagination on this.
Yeah, that exactly. So you have to work within the scope of what you have, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, on the subject of working in projects and things, and I was going to, do you like working on those sorts of things? And do you do any fundraising or events for the local community, or a school production in concerts, or that sort of thing? And is that something you do in school, or is that something that you do out of school?
Unfortunately, no, I don't do any of this stuff. But it sounds like a real idea. Like that business question you were asking me one day. I want to start a business helping parents pay off debt.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, and how do you think you might go around that? Have you got any ideas about how that might be created?
Well, first, I need to have a job that will do. I need to have a job that will do good, and so once I have a actual business, I'll start that because the thing about charity is it doesn't pay you, you give, which is I think is way better than getting paid because you see other people happy. So that's how I'd form that. I would put up like a big stand of all kinds of water bottles, fresh lemonade, and like hats on like a nice hot day. And I would put $1 for everything, and then and what I'm gonna do with that money is I'm going to give it to parents who can't pay off debt.
Oh, right, brilliant. Yeah, I can see that's a great idea. So you're sort of using something that everyone's going to need on that particular day to create some money, and then from there you can then pass that on to people that need it. That's a really nice way of doing it, and I like the way you see the overall picture of what you're trying to achieve, and also how you're going to get there, which is fantastic. And my last question is, of all the things that you enjoy doing most of your during your day, do they happen in school or are they after school clubs? So, for example, my daughter really likes dancing and basketball, and trampolining and gymnastics, but most of those happen as after school clubs. They're not part of her sort of school curriculum day. So she would say that it's sort of generally after school. But do the things you like most happen in school or after schools?
Well, it depends on what kind of day I have, because most of the time, as I said, people can be jerks. At karate, we do sparring, and that can make me burn off some steam. But also, there's some stuff that I really like at school, because we went to one of the things on my bucket list was skydiving, and we went to this field trip where there's this thing called I Fly, and you can like fly, and there's this weird tube thing that makes you fly. And so it all depends on what kind of day I have. But if I had to like pick one, I would say during school, because right now this summer break, if it wasn't no thanks to my friend, it's been pretty boring.
Okay, great. So that sounds great. So your school actually has enabled you to do some things, like you said, like the skydiving, which you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So actually, your school sounds quite proactive from that point of view, which I really like. That sounds fantastic. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much for chatting. Is there anything else that if you could create your perfect day or your perfect school that you would add that people might be interested in listening to, in terms of making your learning experience more interesting or more creative or more inspiring for you to achieve your dream that you obviously have of being successful in business and being able to donate some money to other people?
Well, all I have to say is good luck for all those people who are gonna try and do it. Don't let anyone put you down.
Sounds like a very smart way to finish our conversation. Thank you so much for chatting to me.
Been a pleasure.
Brilliant. And now I'm going to chat to Addison, who's in the fourth grade, and we're just going to wait for them to swap over on the mic and say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for coming on and chatting. And have you heard those conversations so far?
Sort of.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll take you through them again, and we'll and we can have your opinion and your ideas of what you think works for you. So, how old are you, Addison?
I'm 8, about to turn 9.
Ah, brilliant. Okie doke. So that gives us a good idea of where you are in your learning cycle. So, if you could design your own classroom, what would it look like? Would it be like a large open plan sort of loft style room, or would it be small rooms? How would you sit? Would you do lots of stuff in groups? Would you sit in rows? I mean, if you could just completely choose what it would be like, how would you describe it, and what would you create?
Probably a large room.
I like a large room as well because it means that you can move around and you can have different things.
More space.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you a chance to do different things in the same room without getting in the way of other people. And I saw a great.
And not that hot. Not hot at all. My classroom this year was hot.
Really? And is that because it's small or it needs aircon or more windows?
Oh.
What do you think?
And no air conditioning.
Oh, that makes it. I can relate to that because here in England today it's 32 degrees, which by our standards is super hot, and there's very few places that aren't shops or restaurants that have air conditioning. So I've been working in a school today, and it was really hot, and I have to say that makes it really tricky to work, doesn't it?
So it's nighttime in London right now?
No, it's tea time, so it's all dinner time, 5:30 in the evening. So I think you guys are slightly behind, aren't you? Is it your lunchtime now? Somewhere around lunchtime? So I think you're about 5 hours behind. So yeah, so different time zone exactly. So how would you create your day if you could have your day any way you'd like? How much time sort of relatively would you spend inside to outside? And
Well, it depends on how the class behaves.
okay, so in terms of if everyone was behaving well, then you could really choose and
Yeah. I would go outside earlier, like a little bit earlier, if we get the work done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think you need
It's
to
definitely not a groups.
okay? Do you need to get the work done first? Do you think is sort of going outside like a reward, or if you could get outside first, do you think you would then come back and work easier?
Probably not.
No.
Because it'll probably be in the end of the day.
Okay, so you need that incentive to actually have
Yeah.
sort of knuckled down and done some work first. Okay, that's interesting. And how much time of the day would you split if you, like you said, there's a bit of studying, there's some exercise, there's time on your own, and you're doing some games or projects or whatever. How would you split the day up if you had complete control?
Project, it depends how the kids act in the subject, how long it's going to take. Because you also have other subjects to do.
Right, exactly. So it depends on the people that are involved, and also
Yeah.
how much concentration you have, depending on what type of subject it is. Because I guess if you're outside doing some kind of sport game, then you may be able to do that for longer than if you're, I don't know, doing a kind of a maths project or something, which is just purely your brain working.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, great. And how do you assess your progress? I guess having just been chatting to Anderson, we were talking about having exams and all of that type of thing. I mean, do you think exams are important, or is there another way you think you could do it?
Time. Like SOLs, they don't stay on the permanent record. They just help you
Okay.
for your grades. So basically, it's a waste of time doing the SOLs. Waste of time.
Okay, so
But helpful.
Okay, so you think maybe studying for exams which actually are qualifications that'll help you gain a job or go to university or something are important,
Yeah.
but the ongoing exams you don't find are necessarily that important.
Well, it depends what type. Like SOLs are important for your grades, but other like small tests for like tiny like subjects like science and social studies,
Yeah.
which are my favorite, and math and language arts.
Okay, so you think the sort of the lots of tests ongoing are a bit much,
Yeah.
and you don't really need that. Just maybe less tests, but more spread out. So, but
Yeah.
you do find it's a good way to understand how much you've learned. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's interesting. So you wouldn't get rid of tests altogether. You actually think that they're a good thing. Okay, interesting. So my next question is, how often do you discuss and think about things like what you eat, exercise, breathing, sleeping, mindfulness, being grateful or volunteering, things which aren't necessarily academic lessons, but something a little bit more about your life generally?
Yeah, here's the thing. We have this PE teacher, and we have to wear uniforms. It's gonna make us hot, and she gets to wear short sleeve shirts. Seriously, and with collars, she doesn't have to wear collars.
So actually so making sure that whatever you are doing actually works both ways. So if you're going to do exercise, then you need exercise clothes, and if you're going to talk about what you're eating, making sure everyone's doing it in the same way. So that sounds that was something that came up before. So it's obviously something you're both passionate about, which I can understand, and make the most of the class that you're doing. So yes, very, very interesting.
And
Sorry, Carol.
if we don't even get one thing right, we get the timeout. Seriously, one thing wrong, like a simple one thing. If we get a question wrong, exactly, we get a timeout.
Okay, so
Or like a point taken away.
right. So you'd rather it was just a bit more organic, I guess, so that you could just try things. If you get them wrong, you can try again, or you can, it's all part of your progress rather than feeling like you failed or that you need a punishment of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's exhausting.
Yes, because you're always up against it, I guess, aren't you?
No one likes no one, you know what? No one likes that resource at all. No one in that school or the children.
Oh, well, that's interesting. That's really interesting. So my next question is, how often do you discuss and think about life? And so by that, I mean sort of the whole expanse of life, the idea from being born as a
Life
baby.
cycles?
Yeah, exactly, like a life cycle, yeah.
Well, we only learn about frogs and butterflies, and then we just we just forget about it, and then we go back to it. I mean, we know it from kindergarten.
All the way through. But there's no discussion about how that affects you personally, or how your understanding of a life cycle
We already
could
know
affect
the
you.
life cycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So how often do you discuss money and budgets and savings and financial things as part of your school, or is it something that you've learned outside of your school or from somebody else?
I don't know. I honestly do not know at all.
Okay, so it's not something you've really come across
No.
or something that's on your thing. Fair enough.
No.
My next question is, do you work with a mentor and do you know what a mentor is?
Mean like a teacher? Something like
Yeah,
that?
exactly. A teacher can be a kind of mentor. A mentor for me is someone
Yes.
that supports you in whatever it is that you're trying to learn and trying to achieve. So I think a mentor is slightly more about helping you in something that you want to learn or be supported in, rather than necessarily just a teacher who's there to teach you, if that makes sense.
Yes, I do have a mentor, but she helps me like reading. She helps me with reading.
Okay, so you've got someone a specialist person to help you with something, and do you like that relationship? Is that something you find helpful?
Yes, yes, and she takes me out of class. Yay! So I don't have to do something.
Yeah.
Yay!
And I quite like it because they're often a much more friendly, supportive kind of relationship, aren't they? And I guess more
You're not yelling much.
yeah, and one-on-one, which is nice, isn't it, when you're taught individually rather than just in large groups all the time. So my next question is, how often do you lead a team of people? Do you sort of do groups of things in school, and do you get the chance to lead a group of people in a project or something that you're doing?
Sometimes we get to pick our partners. Sometimes we don't. It's horrible. They decided for us. It's our life. Come on, it's not yours.
Okay, so you actually think you should get a choice, or there should be a way
Yeah.
of you deciding to work in your best way rather than someone else choosing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
me.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Do you like working on projects and
Yes.
and certainly things
Yeah.
which are interesting to you? And in terms, I don't know, do you do any fundraising? Do you do any events in your community? Do you do a school production or concerts or sports or anything like that? What sorts of things are those things do you like, and what have you experienced?
Oh, you mean like charity?
Yeah, some charity stuff, or a school concert, or a school production.
No, no. Oh yeah, but it don't. I forgot. Yeah, it is charity. If you raise enough money, you get a prize.
Okay.
It's just a waste of time.
And what was that for? What was that raising money for?
I forgot.
Oh, right. So whatever it was, it obviously didn't impact you enough to really
No,
stay involved in it.
It's just wasting your money.
Yeah. Okay. And of the things that you enjoy most in your school day or your day generally, do they happen in school time, or are they things that happen after school?
School time.
Okay. And what sort of things are they then?
Resource. After lunch, I have resource. My favorite two resource are art and music.
And great. And so just explain to us how your school day works. I'm sort of imagining that you kind of do your more academic stuff in the morning, and then the afternoon is much more, like you said, about arts and music. Does that happen every day? Is it working the same way?
Sort of. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have double resources. Where we have one and then we go to another one.
Okay.
And teachers get to hang out for like I think like 2 hours. I think I don't know. It's not hours because it probably will be at the end of the day. But after research, it's pretty much the end of the day.
Okay. And but it's those type of things that you really enjoy the most. That sort of creative side of the arts and music and that sort of thing. Okay. And do you find that the more academic subjects you do help you in that and support you in that, or do you see them as different things?
Different things because they're different subjects.
Okay. Right, interesting. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much for chatting to me. And is there anything else, if you could create your own school or your school day, that you'd like to put in? No uniforms. Okay.
Yeah, they're uncomfortable.
So being able to wear your own clothes is something which you'd really like, just so that you're comfortable and happy and be able to do the things you need to do at school in the best way.
Oh, when you were talking about in the beginning for like design your own classroom, probably not groups because they'll chat a lot. Probably like just like islands, like separate.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And would you be able to work in your own way? So would you always be sat in the same place, or would you move around depending on how you were feeling that day? Or, for example, if you were with some people who were chatting all the time, you could just take yourself off.
No, it depends how they act. Like my class is a chatterbox.
Right. And how do you feel about that? Would you rather it was quiet?
Here's the thing: we don't get enough recess for chatting.
Okay.
It's annoying.
So you need more time so that you can be social and do what you need to do with yourselves, and then you'd have more specific energy to actually study.
Sort of like that. Sort of not.
Yeah.
Oh.
But more time for you to actually hang out with your friends and just chat and enjoy yourself, not when you're having to do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I can understand that. So that sounds very interesting. And I did hear from our little pre-chat before we started recording that you are both starting your own podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about that, in case there's anyone listening who thinks that that'll be a very cool thing to listen to?
Probably like kids that are like are interested. Interested.
Okay, and what's your podcast going to be about?
Harry Potter and how they add something that you miss and like why. Stuff like that. Oh, warning! Spoiler alert might happen.
I see.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned. Warning: if you have not listened to the books or seen the movie, do now listen to this podcast. Just a heads up.
Very good.
Unless they want to be spoiled.
Great. And when are you creating this? Are you doing it as part of your summer holidays, or are you? When are you going to be doing it?
I don't know. Mommy said the beginning, like after school ends, but I don't know.
Great. Well, it sounds like a very exciting thing to do, and your mum's in the perfect place to help you create an awesome podcast as a podcaster herself.
But she has one, so there's really. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Addison, thank you so much for chatting with me, and also say thanks to Anderson again as well. And I really appreciate all your great answers to my questions, and I think we're starting to get a real idea of what's important to you as a child learning in school, and certainly from where you are in America as well. That's given us some really great things to think about. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Education on Fire podcast. For more information of each episode and to get in touch, go to educationonfire.com.